Today we're going to be working on this Xbox One X. This has been sent in by a customer and it's been sent in as a rush job because he was cleaning out his console and he scratched the motherboard, causing it to no longer turn on. So unfortunately this is a fairly common thing when people take apart the console. The X-clamp which holds the heatsink down to the motherboard, when they try and remove that, they end up stabbing into the board and cutting through some of the RAM lines, and that means that the RAM can't communicate with the system, causing it to have a beep on beep off issue, which is exactly what we're facing here. So with that being said, my name's Dakota, I'm an electronics technician. I mainly work on games consoles, but I do work on other stuff as well, so if that's the sort of stuff, I can never say them words, I need to change it. If that's the sort of stuff you're into, be sure to get subscribed and turn on the bell notifications, that way you don't miss any future videos. If you need to organise a repair, you can get in touch with me at dakota.repair. And if you need to get any parts and supplies for these, you can get those on my online store, consolefix.shop. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. You probably don't give a damn about what I've got to say, but just hear me out for a minute, alright? We all know that those sweaty little douchebags with cheesy fingers, living in the mom's basement, drinking Red Bull and simping over TikTok losers are good to break the console. And you and I both know that you're too cheap to buy off eBay, you're too impatient to wait for AliExpress, and you're just about smart enough to avoid Amazon completely. You can admit it, because I'm exactly the same. That's why I started my online store, consolefix.shop. I'll sell every part you'll need to fix the Xbox One, Series S, Series X, PS4, PS5 and Nintendo Switch consoles. So why not give me the money instead of some random dude on eBay? At least if I have it, you know it's not going to waste on some stupid thing like promoted eBay listings or food for the kids or something. If you give me your money instead, I'll promise I'll use it on useful things, like buying views on TikTok. So before you decide to go to one of the more popular sites and line the pockets of some fat cat loser, take a look at my online store. Check out the link in the video description or the top pinned comment and get 10% off any order over £25 during checkout. Alright, now you can go back to watching this douchebag on YouTube trying to fix something.
You can't say stuff like that in an advert, dude.
You're not my dad, dude. Don't tell me what to do.
That's what you think, Phil.
Wait, what? Mom? Okay, let's have a look at what's going on with this first of all. So, I'm plugging the power cable and... yeah, okay. So we don't even see a light, it just beeps and doesn't turn on. Yeah, okay, cool. So these are fairly common issues which I come across on these things. Obviously, you know, it's not going to be down to any kind of fault with the system or anything like that. It's purely down to user damage. But it is something I do see quite regularly because people... well, they're just not careful enough, basically, and they end up damaging the board. I've seen this a number of times, and usually it's fixable, but we'll see. I haven't actually seen the damage yet. I haven't seen any pictures of it or anything like that. So, like I said, this has been sent in as a rush job. So, the customer basically wants it fixing. I received it late yesterday afternoon, like 3 PM yesterday afternoon, and the customer wants it fixing within 24 hours. So, I do charge a little bit extra for that. I'll charge £20 extra to do a rush job, which I think is fair because I'm basically dropping everything else to do it. Hopefully, we can get it sorted. So the £20 rush fee, that will be payable whether I can fix this or not, along with the £20 bench fee as well. Obviously, if I do fix it, I won't charge a bench fee. I'll just charge the normal repair cost. But if I can't fix it, I have unfortunately had to start introducing a bench fee because people keep sending me, well, things that can't be fixed. So they'll get sent elsewhere and they can't fix it, so they send them to me and they've screwed it up and stuff like that, and it's not fair on me. So I have unfortunately had to start introducing a bench fee just to stop that from happening. It's been a hot minute since I've worked on a Series X. Sorry, a 1X. Okay, so that's been damaged, but that's not really a big issue. It's just like a spacer for the Wi-Fi boards, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth board. So that's not really an issue. That's broken. I did hear a couple of things rattling around inside here, so... Oh, okay, it's a random screw. Huh. Not sure where that come from, but... yeah, we've got a random screw in there. Okay. Well, that doesn't belong in this console, that's for certain. Okay, so this has been cleaned by the look of it. Okay, there we are. So that's practically fully disassembled now. Just got to get these screws out of here. Okay, so let's just see what it is that we're dealing with then. So I can see a bit of a hole just here. You'll see that under the scope in a minute when I take the heatsink off and put it under the microscope. So I can see some damage. So what they've done is they've taken a screwdriver like this. So they've taken a flat screwdriver and they've gone like this to remove the heatsink. And obviously when they're doing that, they've slipped. Now you can do it like this, but it takes practice and it takes precision, because one slip and you end up with this. So you can do it with a screwdriver, but I highly recommend getting yourself a X-clamp tool because, well, I mean, let's face it, it's a lot safer than doing it this way, right? And yes, a lot of the time I do it this way myself, so I can't really judge anyone for doing it this way. However, I'm used to it. So yeah, I mean, I've actually done this myself. I've damaged boards myself doing it when I first started working on Xboxes. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter how experienced you are, it can happen to anyone. So I can't really judge the customer for what he's done. Okay. I've got a feeling that he's given up when he saw that damage because that thermal paste hasn't been changed. So let's have a look under the microscope and we'll see what's actually going on up close, shall we? Right, okay, so here's the back of the board where the heatsink is, and there's a few areas where I've noticed there's damage here. So first of all, in the top right, we've got some damage just here. And yes, indeed, these are RAM lines. So if you look here, this is the back of one of the RAM chips. So if you look at the schematic, you'll see that C523, C533, 544, etc. These are all going to be connected to the RAM, and obviously, you know, that's going to cause communication issues with the RAM. If you follow these traces down, they actually go into the APU. So this is the back of the APU right here, and they actually go into the back of the APU. So yeah, we've got quite a few damaged lines here actually. 3 lines there which are damaged, probably one that needs a trace repairing. There's 2 there. We've got some damaged traces there. We've got a damaged trace there. And yeah, these are all RAM lines. So we've got a damaged trace there. If we look on this side, we've got another damaged trace there. We've also got damaged traces here as well. Okay. So we need to evaluate which ones are going to need fixing and which ones don't. So we're going to start in this corner here because this is the worst of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give the PCB a little bit of a scrape where the traces are. So we're going to need to replace this one, or repair this one rather. So we've got that line there. This line here needs repairing. And the one next to it is fine. Okay, so if I expose this side, Okay, yeah, so there's 3 lines which need repairing here, as you can see by the ones I've exposed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tin up this area. I'm going to tin these traces which I've just exposed, and then I'm going to solder some jumper wires using some 1mm enamel wire. It's actually 1.7mm. I use some wire out of a microwave motor because I just think it's better quality than the stuff that you can buy off, for example, AliExpress and eBay. So I use 1.7mm wire from a microwave. But essentially what we want to do is we want to add some flux. And then I'm going to take my soldering iron and I'm going to grab some leaded solder and just tin up these traces. There we are, so that's that done. I'm actually going to change iron tips because this iron tip is pretty much gone now. And to be fair, I only really need a very thin iron tip anyway. Something with a little bit more precision, like this conical tip, even though I absolutely despise conical tips. But something with a little bit more precision. I could use the micro pencil, but meh. So here's my enamel wire, and what I'm going to do is just start off by tinning the wire by scraping back the enamel. So it's got an enamel coating which basically prevents it from shorting out, but I want to tin that. And I could probably do with a little bit of solder on the iron tip. There we are. And then I'm just going to partially solder this wire to here. Just hold that in place while I grab some tweezers. There we are. And then just the other end of it, do the same. And I don't think this soldering iron tip is going to cut it, so I'll grab a different one. Okay, there's that. So that's that first one done. And then we'll just need to trim the excess wire. like that. And then if I just use a little bit of hot air, move this flux out of the way, I'll be able to see better. But also what I can do here as well is float this wire just so as it jumps into place properly. There we are. And then we can move on to the next one. These are very, very, very thin traces, and the pitch in between each trace is also incredibly thin, or narrow rather. Alright, so there's those three done. So again, like I did just with the first one, I did that just for an example, but what I'm going to do is just heat these up and reflow them, and that'll basically clean up the joints for me, save me having to do it manually. And the reason I do that is just to make sure we've got a nice connection between each joint. Alright, that's good. So I'm going to grab a little bit of isopropyl alcohol on a brush and gently clean this away here. And when I say gently, I mean gently. This is very fragile. We need to put some conformal coating on this to protect it. I'm sorry, not conformal coating, solder mask. Should probably correct myself before the comments correct me. Alright, and that's basically what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be running jumper wires to all of these traces, all of the ones that are damaged, and trying to restore the connections as close to the factory connection as possible. Damn it, that one wasn't good enough. It didn't withstand my well, not so much a test, but it didn't withstand the cleaning, which means it's not good enough. So it's going to have to be done again. That's fine. So when I say as close to factory as possible, I really do mean as close to factory as possible. And there's a very, very good reason for it. So you see how we've got bends and zigzags in the traces? Well, that's there for timing. So all of the data signals have to come and arrive at the destination at the correct time. So basically, if some of the timings are out, it's going to cause corruption and, you know, just unexpected behaviour, basically. And obviously the manufacturer has worked out, or the PCB designer has worked out exactly how long these traces need to be, because they're all in different positions. They've worked out exactly how long it needs to be before, you know, for each signal to arrive at the correct time. So even a millimetre out can be the difference between the signal arriving correct or not. Okay. There we are. That withstood the cleaning that time. No, it just keeps breaking away. See, this is why I make sure that all of these connections are solid, because I don't want this to fail in 6 months' time. You know, I do offer a warranty on the work that I do, but I don't want this failing 6 months down the line. I want this to work, and I want it to work for as long as possible. Or I don't want the console to die again because of my work, because of, you know, poor quality workmanship and stuff like that. I would much rather do it properly the first time and not have to worry about it. Okay, so I'm being pretty aggressive with the cleaning here. Just making sure it's not going to break. And there we go. So, yeah, that's essentially what I'm going to be doing. And then hopefully this will be working afterwards. So, I'll probably fast forward through most of this because this is going to take me a while. So while I'm grinding away, I can also be inspecting the traces and just make sure that I don't grind too far. I don't end up breaking a trace that's not already broken, and also make sure that I get every single trace which needs to be repaired. So if it's just a little bit of exposed copper, I'm not bothered about that. The thing that I'm bothered about is obviously the damaged lines. So for example, this one that's next to the broken one doesn't need replacing. So it's not broken. It's exposed, but it's not broken. So I'm not worried about that one. I'm only worried about the ones that are physically disconnected. So this one here, you couldn't actually see. It looked like it was still connected, right? But then as soon as I've ground back a little bit, we've seen that we've got a break right where the impact mark is. So if it was connected, it was kind of on its last legs. And obviously, you know, one little power spike or something like that and it could burn the wire out, or burn the trace out rather. So obviously we need to make sure that all of the connections are going to be solid. Okay, that one's good. So I'm just moving corner to corner here. Looks like we've just got the, well, possibly 3, but 100% there's one there damaged. Okay, so those 2 are not damaged. They're absolutely fine. This one, however, is. Again, same here. We've got 3 here which are exposed, but they don't look damaged. But what I am going to do, just to confirm it, if I put the slightest bit of heat on this, if they're damaged to a point where they're going to cause a problem, they will burn away, basically. It'll just break them away with a little bit of heat from the iron. So I'll just run the iron across them. Basically tin them up, and that will actually improve the connection anyway, because, well, we're adding solder to it, right? But no, they are absolutely fine. They didn't break away. So you can see they're a little bit warped and damaged. Well, you can't see at the minute because of the reflections, but you'll see in a second that they're a little bit warped and damaged, but they're not actually broken. And adding a little bit of solder has just improved those connections. So I feel like it's pointless actually adding a jumper wire to those. This one, however, does need a jumper wire. Might help if I ground it away first. Alright. Okay, so let's just make this connection a little bit more acceptable. There we are. And there we are. Alright, I think that's it. I don't think we've got any more damage. I'm not seeing any broken capacitors or other components. Not immediately. So I think we're good there. So what we need to do then is we need to add some solder mask to this. But I don't want to add solder mask until I know 100% that it's going to be working. So what I'll do, and here's the work that we've done, so you can barely see it. I mean, you wouldn't see it just like that. You may see it with your eye. I can, but I know where it is. So the work we've done is basically, there's a trace there, there's a bunch of traces on this one, there's a trace on that one, and etc, etc, right? There's traces in all four corners. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that this is actually going to work before I go any further. So before I complete this job, I'm going to need to test it before I move on to the final stage. So I'll clean off the thermal paste. And I'm going to add some fresh MX4 here. There we are. Don't worry about the thermal paste that's around the capacitors on the APU. It doesn't really matter about cleaning that off as long as the die is clean and we've got fresh paste on. It's absolutely fine. But what I'm going to do here is just temporarily reassemble this enough to test it. So I'm not going to put it back inside the housing. I'm not bothered about that. All I'm bothered about is seeing this power on. Don't need to see anything else. So I'm going to take the power supply and the hard drive. That's all I need. There we are. And just because it's there and connected to this, I can just connect up the fan. We'll see the fan spinning there then as well. But yeah, all I need to do is just confirm that this turns on. So let's give that a shot, shall we? Alright, moment of truth. Haha! That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. That is what we want to see. We want to see this powering on and staying on. I'm going to make sure it boots into dashboard and then I can continue. Oh, no. I've just lost connection. That's just because that's not plugged in properly. Don't worry about that. It's fine. Yeah, that was just when I moved it. So I'll power this back on and I'll connect it up to the capture card. And there we go. That does indeed start to boot. It's going to take a while, so I'm going to give this 10 seconds or so, 30 seconds, whatever it takes. This is a spinning drive. It's going to take a little while to actually boot up. But just for context, I've been recording for 58 minutes and this is back to a working state. So if I was to actually take off the time it takes me to record, which always takes twice as long on YouTube, I'd have had this done and finished in half an hour, 45 minutes with reassembly. But there we go. That's it. It's booting into dashboard. That's perfect. Absolutely fantastic. So let's just shut it down. All right. So I can get rid of that now. And the hard drive for now. Pop under the scope again. Alright, so the final step then is going to be to just protect these lines. So what I need to add is something called solder mask, which is basically like a PCB glue. And what it does is it just re-insulates the traces and allows me to, well, basically protect them from damage. I mean, it's not going to protect from a stab, but it is going to protect it from, obviously, touching metal on the chassis and stuff like that. So we're going to just add some of that. I'm just going to spread it across. You don't need a lot. But basically, I'm just going to do this on all of the traces that I've just fixed and anything that's exposed. So any trace that's exposed, we're going to want to protect it to make sure that it doesn't short out on the ground of the chassis and stuff like that. And also just so it's not exposed to the elements in general, because that's not going to be good for the board. So we'll just protect it as best we can. So I'm just going to basically gather up some of this because there's too much on this one. So I'll gather up some of this and I'll basically use it. Actually no, I'll just clean off the excess. Don't worry, it saves me moving backwards and forwards. So I'll just add some more on this side. Spread this over. So that's about the amount you want to use. Just a thin layer, just enough to protect it and to re-insulate it. Maybe a tad more here. There we are. Okay, there we are. So that's that done. All of those damaged lines have been recoated. So the final step then is just to cure this using a UV light. So I'm going to get that sorted. So basically all of this UV mask, all of this solar mask, I'm just going to expose to UV light, and then basically that'll cure it and harden it to a point where it's going to protect the traces. So this is going to take a little while because I've got quite a bit to do. So I'll fast forward through this bit. Right, okay, there we go. So I've exposed all four sides to UV mask. But one thing you can do, just to help harden the UV mask, is just use a little bit of heat with it while it's exposed to the UV light. Use a little bit of heat to it and it'll basically harden even more. So just move from corner to corner, just expose it to some heat at the same time, and there we are. Let's just have a quick look under the scope, and yeah, that looks good to me. Absolutely beautiful. Alright, so all that's left to do on this now is just to reassemble it, get it all put back together and give it a final test. So I'll fast forward through the reassembly process and we'll make sure that everything works before we call this job complete. Okay, that is the console fully reassembled then. So let's just give it a final test. There we are, it's turning on. And there we go, beautiful. So there we go, this console is working again. I obviously still need to give it a full test. You know, I need to make sure that it's running smoothly, that the thermals are okay and stuff like that. But other than that, this console is fixed and the customer can get back to gaming on it. They're still very viable machines. I don't know why people don't use them anymore. You know, especially the Series X, sorry, the One X. They are really, really good machines still, and they still do a lot of what people want them to do. Obviously, you know, they're not the latest generation, but they are still working, they are still running games and stuff. So yeah, anyway, that being said, this console's fixed and I'm sure the customer's going to be happy with it. I received it at around about 3 PM yesterday. It is now 11 AM the next morning and this console is working. So yeah, yes, it skipped the queue because the customer's paid me more and I'm a money grabbing YouTuber. So yeah, but it's one of those things. I do have an expedited fee if people do want a rush job. You know, it doesn't really take that much out of my day, but I do have to drop basically everything to do it. So yeah, the customer will be paying £50 for the repair, which I think is a reasonable price. It's taken me around about an hour. Maybe a little bit less if I wasn't recording, but my minimum fee basically for this type of a repair is £50. If it was worse, I'd obviously have to reevaluate, but for the most part, it's going to cost the customer £50, but he's also paid the £20 expedited fee as well on top of that. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you're new to the channel. As always, if you need any parts and supplies for these, you can get those on my online store, consolefix.shop, and if you need to organise a repair, you can get in touch with me at thecodad.repair. So with that being said, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, I'll see you later. Bye for now.